concerning the path to go through life with a good heart as well as the spirit of wildness. This is like learning to balance between two contradictory forces that are very hard to explain. Most women or men, or both, will agree to the following statement that pulls us in different directions. On one side, there is the savage, the animal within us, the passion which makes us ready to fight, build, reproduce, to survive. On the opposite end, we have the archetype of our higher self, which is that reflective or spiritual aspect that desires connection, knowledge, and serenity. Where one's life truly lies gets a little clearer, though. The trick to fully living becomes not choosing between the two. This balance is a sort of strength. It is a form of ability in a society which continues to attempt to confine individuals into binaries of either feminine or masculine. When I started my process of seeking, I tended to gravitate in a rather spiritual direction. I studied essays that preached the gospel of surrender, non-attachment, and ego transcendence. Yet it made me feel at ease, and despite that, there was still so much emptiness within me. I had the weird sensation of leaving half of myself behind the dream of acting in power and letting out the unbounded impulses that I possess. But then came a pivotal moment, an aha, that shattered the quiet glass of my overly calm spirituality. I had to get back the spirit of wildness in me. For most, that wildness is tamed by conditioning, education, culture, fear of rejection. We are often told to contain it in order to conform to the prevailing norm, as it defies the calm, woke, harmonized world most New Age communities celebrate. But when you are squelching any part of you, all you end up doing is creating an imbalance. That wildness will come out in a spring ready to explode, and when it does, it will do so in a force that cannot be contained. I have witnessed this in people, and how they devote years of their lives pursuing some kind of heavily structured plan, just to throw it all away for a life of anarchy. For instance, there is the case of the businessman who has been so dedicated as to climb the corporate ladder all his working years. He is obedient, hard-working, and a great earner according to society's standards. But one day, he reaches the climax. He is spiritually bankrupt. He is indeed an empty man. So, he turns towards something new, prescribing practices and uncertainties such as meditation, yoga, maybe even spiritual vacations. Only there he gets what he was looking for all his life, but only because the man was brave enough to leave all his orderly life behind and go after savageness and unfamiliarity. Something that people seem to lose sight of is that this man is still vehemently attached to the business side of things, as well as being an actor and writer. He did not leave out passion or goals, but elevated it to a new level. Now he runs it not more a thinking works, but from a very bottom, from experience and gut feeling. This is what it means to graft the savage onto the prophet. Perhaps more noticeable than any other aspect is that people seem to categorize themselves into two camps. Some live within their savageness and literally fritter away their lives, full of vigor but restless and empty inside. Some people draw themselves into religion, searching for serenity without learning how to embrace joy. Because of this, I think, the general world population is in a constant search of fulfillment. Living is not between becoming a wild wolf and being a gentle swan. It is between these two things, in the same way that a tree has its roots pointed into the ground as it stretches toward the sky. For instance, I recall a friend who was completely in her wilder days. This woman was physically active, ambitious, and eager to try more exciting things in her life. However, with time, the glamour of this hunt diminished, leaving her irritated, confused, and quite not even sure what exactly she was pursuing. That is when she came across with meditation and mindfulness, which was very useful to her to get out from the anxiety state. In fact, the wildness in her remains evident, and that is a wonderful thing to note about her. But indeed, She learned that her energy increased and felt so wild, which in turn was useful rather than being vagrant. Hence, the flame that was burnt in her did not flicker down, but rather brightened with more intense passion. Her story is a good example of how a woman does not have to deny herself one or the other. She can be strong and analytical. There is also something to be learned for those who possibly don't know when to enter or exit the field. Seasons of life exist. That is how, at different times, we need to stress different aspects of that personality or character. This is wild energy which, for a young person, especially one in his or her 20s, is crucial. This is the time for adventure. It is where a person finds himself going out on a limb. The main attribute at this stage is courage. Without it, growth is out of the question. That is why a lot of men, indeed, of all people, at one point or another, live through their crises and feel sheer emptiness. Such ones are necessary, initiations, trials in which we have to grow and develop. That's why we never know how strong we are without them. Yet, all of us grow older, and so the wildness we know has to be tamed with some civility. So when I became aware of this fact being in my 30s, I had to let go of the idea that I could call myself a raging bull and just run through life without reconsidering a step. I had to learn how to stop as well as to look inside and attend to the voice of the inner self, to act and to meditate. It does not imply extinguishing that flame. It is getting control of it instead. However, the idea is to not change this nature, but to polish it to become more acceptable. It's like sharpening a blade. You don't want to blunt it, but you do want it to be cutting edge. Therefore, it is essential to understand that balance is not something permanent. We are always in a process of balancing, sometimes going to the side of the animal, other times to the side of the spiritual animal. What is important is that we allow ourselves to move back and forth, to change according to the requirements of life, and yet still stay true to ourselves. Sometimes there will be the case of being too submissive, or on the other extreme, being very aggressive. But those moments in particular show what we need to change. They are a mechanism that is incorporated into the development. It is true that for women, this conflict between sexual savageness and cognition is parallel too. To be specific, there are two major archetypes of women, the caregiver or the shrew, which modern women struggle to embody. However, the truth is that a person can be something of both extremes. It also means that a woman can be very strong, have a good job, and be a career woman. But still, she's also a woman who is capable of taking care of others. There is a misconception that it is always one or the other. That is not true. It is about realizing that everyone is different and complex. I wonder how a woman who is aware of her inner savage, but also the woman who is fully in touch with her inner pedestal as a spiritual warrior, could be stopped. Finally, the scale that exists between the two, the wild and the spiritual, is about reclaiming home in our lives. It is about accepting that you need both parts of you to be whole, complete, and utterly essential. The passage of time alters a person or thing and transforms them, and so within each phase of a person's life, she is expected to purify how she treads the earth. Whether we are at the beginning full of fire and courage, or later in life seeking peace and clarity, the goal remains the same. To live freely, to live with passion, passion in life and passion for life. In retrospect, I would now admit that on many occasions, spirituality seemed like the wrong way to go. Not because it was not beneficial to me in leading my ascetical life, but because my wild side was being suppressed. The lesson learned is that there is no single thread of existence, only the thread in which all of you meet. It's not about being polite and protector, mystic and macho man. It's about becoming complete. When you get to that point, life is no longer but something to soldier through, but a thing to be enjoyed, pursued, tasted, and hunted in all its tantalizing fullness, in true wildness. Essence and existence, the raw quality of life and existence, is one great big paradox. When one tries to look closer at the reality, finding out that it is not ours, and solutions are not black-white, but are often hidden between two extremes. Imagining oneself at a roadside junction where two directions meet, that is a man or woman. Can you manage to view a single direction while at the same time understanding that in order to live your life, you need to have the other, but at the same time, it is not all that you are? That's the paradox we face daily, recognizing the two aspects of life. For instance, the relationship between strength and weakness. In our culture, strength is what is valued. It is considered favorable to be a muscular, hardened, non-quarter-inch thick skin that does not falter in front of any difficulties. Indeed, it is in the valley that the mountain is discovered. It is like the valiant, geared-up fighter who dances with the adversary's energy without an attempt to fight it. This kind of flexibility in life is actually helpful, and we learn how to become stronger because we are willing to be vulnerable, to be open, and to be real. When a woman is possessor of the best qualities of a woman and a man possesses what it means to be a man, including the weakness, then he or she is complete. He gets up in the morning, and battling as we all are, he is both a lion and a lamb. And this, I think, is the very essence of emotional health. Let us take relationships as an example of a concept. When it comes to love, people often come to the relationship with unrealistic expectations, or else very realistic expectations of what the relationship should be. In fact, what people want and need is both the fairy tale and the reality of the daily life of two people slowly becoming something more than simply a couple. A couple may be happy thinking, they are mad at each other. They are two people with different needs, wants, beliefs, and pains. The power of being able to be comfortable with that, knowing you need someone but also knowing you don't have to accept everything they are or everything they do, and vice versa, is essential for a proper relationship. Similarly, finding your way in the life path means to embrace the opposites. The spiritual practitioner may spend time dedicating himself to a spiritual pursuit, but may end up understanding that taking a dish to the sink or paying a bill is as holy as any mountaintop meditation. On the other hand, the worldly desire might take over a person's life, so with the attainment of this worldly success, he or she will find that they are left with a void that can only be filled by seeking for spiritual solutions. This is as true as the notion that while one seeks spiritual insight and another seeks worldly success, they are, in fact, the same. Ideally, the existence of the two realms and what it occupies is a complete one. They feed each other, the daily practice leading to the spiritual success and the spiritual leading to the worldly success. A vivid example will illustrate this kind of integration between the public and private sphere. It is observed in the lives of many strong personalities who, having achieved considerable success in their chosen career, opt to become philanthropists or spiritual leaders. Oprah Winfrey, for example, grew from a troubled background to a media queen, only for her to spend most of her productive years focusing on the soul and supporting humanitarianism. By her life, every person will understand that desire and self-realization, ambition, is not an opponent and does not eat away at each other but rather stimulates each other. We should also look at the struggle between liberty and accountability. It is a reality that goes round with all of us every day, and especially in modern society. Liberty is valued. Liberty to be as we want to be. Liberty to say what we want. Liberty to do what we want. But when freedom is total without any imposed structures, it quickly degenerates into anarchy. The same way as a tree will grow tall if it has roots, freedom will also grow if it has responsibility. A young adult may feel the need to become independent, to live in your own little world without parents reprimanding you or telling you what to do, only to be met by the reality that being on your own means paying rent for the house, paying for the electricity bill, and doing your own washing. That is the only way that people can be responsible for their freedom and hence be able to exercise the same. This means it also applies to the least trivial aspects of life's organization, including how we function emotionally. Liberty to feel does not mean the right to be emotional without being held responsible. To utter freedom is gained when one can claim ownership of the feeling without having to justify how one will behave towards them. Another important message can be learned from the instance of the opposition of individuality and conformity. It is an irony of contemporary vibrant culture that encourages individuality in the dictum people should find oneself, while on the other note, human beings are inherently sociable beings. What should be done in order to preserve such personal identity and not to turn into an anonymous name in the group? Here's where life asks us to hold both, to be an individual and at the same time be a member of a group of people. I think this can be likened to playing an individual tune which, though unique, is also in harmony with the beats of the songs which are being played by other dancers. Examined how. It is why in cases of a relationship or a team, people produce their best outcomes when individuals get to contribute their peculiar talents, but collectively towards a centered vision. Besides, life at its core is similar to a symphony. We are all unique people with unique style, rhythm, and harmony. Yet together, we produce something greater than any one of us. It's possible to extract what you want from various experiences, ideas, or approaches, realism or spirituality, and both exist in you. Contrary to what I was taught, there is no one way, and you are supposed to be walking many roads and tying the things that you are learning as you journey along. It is useful to stay always aware of the paradox of control and surrender. Life has moments in which you need to seize the wheel and drive your life as you wish. This is the alpha energy. Whoever you are, a man or woman, straightforward, unapologetic, aggressive. However, probably of equal importance is the willingness to release, to relinquish the hold on things and follow the twists and turns of life. Like when you're a surfer, you paddle vigorously to be able to ride the wave. But the moment you get on the wave, all you do is let go and let the waves take you. To try to bring the ocean under one's influence is to fail miserably at the endeavor. Finally, the most problematic pair can be considered such one, which is love and fear at the same time. Love, I think, is the opposite of fear, but we don't really know what love is because it is intertwined with fear of loss, of being exposed, of being turned down. And yet, it's in facing these fears that we grow in the love between husband and wife even more. Real love is about facing your fears, fearing the loss of a partner, a child, or life itself. It's the parent who is scared out of their wits for the child, but who will watch their child step out into the world. It is obviously the lover who, knowing that the price of being in love is living in pain or loss, chooses to love anyway. Love defeats fear, and from this tango of dances comes one of the most important reasons for living. Therefore, the concept of living in the middle of two opposing phenomena is all about the acceptance of the two principles. Living requires strength and weakness, liberty and accountability, self and relatedness, mastery and receptiveness, affection and courage. And even if people decide to unite the so-called opposites, one begins to look at life and distinguish the latter that are concealed in it. The truth is not a solid concept. It is a living organism that evolves constantly and at the same time is right there in front of us whenever we care enough to look at it. This is life's way. It is the ultimate of life's irony. Some people believe that life is a school with every day being a different grade. However, in reality, life is basically an arena, and anything that happens is a lesson. Yes, it is possible to gain wisdom when reading books, contemplating, or sitting still, waiting for a moment of inspiration. But life's actual revelations, the things that make us change, happen when we leap straight into the middle of it, feeling the adrenaline. They come from engagement, from risk, from living through the turmoil and the quiet in honest ways. At some point, I believed that wisdom was an object, that by running after it, by increasing my inputs, reading more, meditating more, practicing more, I would somehow catch the thing. But then, as I went through my own roller coaster of life, I realized something fundamental. Knowledge is not gained by running from life. In fact, wisdom is not the result of hiding knowledge. It comes when you get out there and go through the socio-economic world, when you go through the life brackets that require you to learn. These are not truths that people can learn from books, yet the Bible, or through meditation and solitude. They are truths that people can learn from their daily experiences and the decisions they make, or the chances they take. Think about it. Did you ever wake up one day with the feeling that reality turned upside down? The moment that changed your life? Perhaps it has to do with the death of a friend or a lover, or indeed a gain, a glorious victory. You did not learn about such moments by reading something or the othery. You learned from living them. And what I realized in that time is that all the details which have been written in the books that are considered as containing wisdom, all the words of those spiritual leaders which have been considered as the messages to people in need, suddenly made sense. That is why such terms assumed a different meaning as you went through the experience yourself. The books assist us to express the lessons, however. The knowledge emerged from the furnace of life. I do know a person who was fond of self-help books to the extreme. He would immerse himself in any new book they released, trying to find the key to joy, success, and contentment. He was familiar with them, just as if he had learned them by rote and could quote them endlessly. Nevertheless, staying put in opposition, and as a hollow vessel for opposition to the loyalists' rule, his life, he himself confessed, remained as barren. He did not implement the knowledge he got. Instead, he was storing it like ornaments on a shelf. One day, after a major separation, he could have read many books, but what he was experiencing can't be described as simple pain. That breakup, that deep breakup, was his lesson. It was dirty, complicated, and had brought a lot of heartache, but it was an education he would not have gotten from any book. Sometimes, perhaps, he attempted to read those books which he had left earlier. Their languages appeared quite different. They had context now. They were not only ideas now, but ideas in the context of what he had already experienced. This, I think, is what many a man forgets when he is engrossed in a relentless hunt for the spiritual reality. They believe it's something to search out in solitude or in empty rooms or in day-long wordless seclusion. Of course, there is a time for quiet and reflective. However, these are not the only two extremes. The broader life messages are learned where you are, in your interactions, choices, career, love, loss, victories, struggles, and the middle of the cycle again. Now, let's back up to speak about relationships for a moment. They are one of the greatest educators. No matter how many books you can read about love, about communication and partnership, it ain't until you're in it that you try to understand what love is, and you are faced with the highs and the lows, with the closeness and the distance. People make you face aspects of yourselves that you wouldn't have any other way. They explain to you where you are self-centered, where you are an oversensitive martyr, where you have to set a limit, or where your heart grows further than you can imagine. You are taught patience, forgiveness, and so much more that books can only describe and never teach you. Any disagreement, any dialogue, is a lesson. And when you climb out of those scenarios, you come out the other end a little more knowledgeable. This wisdom, however, is of an associative type, and its theoretical findings cannot be compared with such moments. It's lived, and that makes all the difference. In fact, to pursue a startup, to travel alone to a new country, or to undergo a personal trauma are some of the most enlightening experiences any graduate could ever get more effectively than going to read in the four walls of a classroom. There are many managers, businessmen, who after years of constructing companies and making successful deals, one fine day they come to a realization that something else is important. They wanted more, something closer to their soul's calling. By the time they were willing to bring spiritual principles into corporate life, they had weathered the pressures of the working world, the triumphs and the trials. They did not withdraw from the world to look for it. They lived life to the hilt, and as it were, their search for spirituality happened in the process. On the other hand, there are people that are so engrossed in matters of spirit that they have shut out the real world. In meditation, in reading books, and in contemplating, oh, how they contemplate. And yet when it comes to everyday life, to relationships, to a job, to travel, they procrastinate. What they are doing is waiting for some perfect state of enlightenment before they jump in. But the irony is that the leap is the thing that delivers the wisdom. It's impossible to get the answers you search for if you run from the situations that could bring you those answers. There is also health, which is another domain that so many people find themselves trapped in perfectionism. Most people dedicate years to getting their nutrition just right, steering clear of the slightest hint of poison, and arranging all of their affairs to the utmost of their ability. If you are operating on all cylinders, doing what you love, and living with purpose, quite often health becomes secondary. When you are being fired and spirited, the body responds to it. By being sensitive to one's energy levels, one is bound to make better food choices. There are lots of skinny individuals who are incredibly concerned with their food choices, and they're so hell-bent on not eating any things that are bad for them that they barely live life, They forget that happiness, employment, and vocation are to the health as nutrients or products one takes in the body. A person's body knows when they are living out their intended purpose. This is how you could eat the croissant, drink the coffee, or smoke the cigarette, and it won't harm you if your heart is fully alive. But if you're lost, feeling anxiety, or off track, even the healthiest of foods may as well be poison. Oh, come on, it is a mere metaphor, but the proverb is really to the point. The real poison is not what you eat, rather fear, doubt, and the uncertainty about the future. When you spark up your fire within, when you come roaring back to life, your health tends to fall into its appropriate place without a lot of conscious effort. Yes, there are times to run and hide, to regroup, to quiet oneself, to rest. Yet there is also a time to commit, take chances, to jump into life full on with no regrets. And when you do, the lessons will follow, and with the lessons, the wisdom you crave. The thing is, you can't wait for it, for wisdom. It is waiting for you at the end of the line, the other side of the rainbow, after the lights have gone out and the curtains have closed. And once you've lived it, that's something you don't even have to learn anymore. It's something you are.